Hi, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers Journal of the Plague Year. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Wednesday, November 18th, and we are talking today with Tom Widroe, a longtime conservative activist, business consultant, former county Republican chair. Tom, thanks so much for joining us from Good Space, whatever that is. That's a co-working place, huh?
It is. It is. And Jerry, thanks for having me on Newsmakers. I really enjoy the work you do. And, for anyone who's in the know, wants to be in the know, I'm glad that you interview the people that you do. I am at Good Space in Goleta, and I thought I'd give a little plug. They have a sign behind me here, and obviously it comes back out reversed, but it's Good Space. And it's a co-working spot, and it's run by a woman named Mika, who does a great job. She's built this place out, spent several $100,000 making it into a really fabulous place for people like me who are independent consultants, contractors. You can have meetings here. They have meeting rooms and high-speed internet, and it's really comfortable. And she's kind of sponsoring me here today to be on the show with you. So I thought I'd give her a plug. And
trying to start a new business amid all of the pandemic, and we can talk about that a little bit. First, I want to, we're going to break some news here. Tom has just been approved as the new executive director, I guess, of the Santa Barbara County Taxpayers Association, longtime watchdog of the public purse, I think since 1956, replacing the inevitable Joe Armendariz, who's gone on to other things. Congratulations on the new job. Tell us a little bit about what the Taxpayers Association is and what it does.
Sure. Yes, I was approved as the executive director, and I agreed to do it. It's consistent with, my personal passion for, some people say it's oxymoronic, but good government, sound government, thoughtful government. I believe that can happen. I've worked in government just because I've been a conservative throughout my life. I've always been in favor of good government policy, and I think that we can have that. I worked for Willie Chamberlain back in the day. I worked for Brooks Firestone. I worked for Ellen Gallagher at the federal level, and I thought all three of them were, had a certain degree of popularity and appreciation on the Central Coast, and for good reason. I think they were pragmatic and thoughtful conservatives. And, I know we're a more of a blue or a liberal leading county, but I think you need that yin and yang. It's important. So as far as Santa Barbara County Taxpayers Association, it's an august advocacy group. And when you do polls of different groups, out in the community, taxpayers usually ranks at the very top in terms of credibility, in terms of name ID. People seem to, whether or not that's because of Santa Barbara County Taxpayers Association, because of Howard Jarvis on a state level, whatever the reason is, people view this idea of being an advocate for how you, not just low taxes per se. It's really not about that. It's about advocacy for good government. And good policy, sound tax policy. You and I discussed, I used to be head of an organization called Santa Barbara City Watch, and we opposed a sales tax increase that Mayor Schneider and that will eventually put on the ballot, and it passed. And we weren't opposed to it because it was bad policy, Jerry. Because it was bad to have a tax increase. We were opposed to it because it was a general tax. So the idea is all the money from that sales tax increase goes into the general fund. And I talked to Helene Schneider. I like Helene very much. I think she was a very good mayor, actually. And honestly, what that tax needed to be was a specific tax that enumerates exactly how you're going to spend the money.
Well, of course, they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to do that because then they would have had to get more than a majority vote, obviously. So
correct.
And we already see that they're trying to move the money around a little bit, or at least they've been talking about it rather than going for infrastructure and other things. So
sure. Isn't it interesting? It's exactly what I said. And I sat down with Helene Mayor Schneider at the time, and I said, look, you're going to get to spend the money however you want. There's no guarantee it's going to get spent on a new police station. There's no guarantee it's going to get spent on infrastructure. And the taxpayers are going to get the short end of or the sour end of the lollipop. And she said, no, there's going to be an oversight committee. It's going to be fine. And sure enough, Black Lives Matter, and people are, upset about the police, and now there's political pressure not to spend it on a new police station. And I just, once, taxpayers, I think, had they weighed in on that, would have said, hey, you know what, if it makes sense and the people know what they're getting, they get a right to vote on that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the county a little bit. We had these budget projections yesterday, of sort of a range of things 5 years out, with the, the kind of economic collapse that we've seen in the pandemic. How do you and the Taxpayers Association look at that in terms of revenues versus cuts and so on? What's the framework got to be going forward?
That's a very good question, because you look at the county's ongoing budget in terms of unfunded liabilities is one. Those are basically a lot of people. And one of the things I think taxpayers should do is educate people who maybe don't really understand how bond issues work, really understand when you talk about unfunded liabilities, you and I who follow this stuff every day, we know, but people don't understand there's not money for future projected expenses. That's simply what it says. It's a liability that you're obligated to in terms of pensions and benefits. So you've made these commitments as a county that you can't necessarily keep up with, or there's no projection that you will. And so something has to change. And what happens is every county board of supervisors kicks that can down the road. And I can tell you, if it were a conservative majority on there, they'd still probably kick it down the road.
It's what government does best.
That's right. We all talk about, we got to fix this problem, until suddenly you say, wait a sec, I don't want to be the one to fix it. And, because it's going to make some people unhappy, because you're going to gore their ox.
So when you go in and testify at the meetings and obviously not go in, but on Zoom, watch the meetings and what's going on, what's your primary focus? Is it we need to reduce the size of this, or we need to apportion the money better, or what's your thought?
Well, I think the first thing I would say, Jerry, is taxpayers is for a strong economy, because look, one of the things that cures budget deficits is a lot of money. And you and I, we could sit there and if we're in a position where we have to prioritize spending cuts, that's a painful situation, right? Some people's going to lose their jobs, some services are going to go away. And obviously some people hopefully benefit from those. So, you don't want to do that if you don't have to. But you really want to prioritize economic opportunity. And Joe, my predecessor, talked about this quite a bit, the morality of prosperity. And I love that Joe came up with that term, or maybe he got it from somewhere else, but I like it. And I'm glad Joe talked about it. There's a certain morality of people having jobs and income and housing and opportunity right here in our county of 450,000. So I think when I go in there to comment, on video about a policy, I want it to be pro-economy, pro-jobs, pro-opportunity, pro-growth, and actually pro-housing too. Because one of the biggest taxes we all have in this county is that regular folks can't afford to buy a home or even rent a place. It's really oppressive. We're so short on housing. And I think taxpayers is going to come out really strong in favor of, especially there's room in North County to build housing east of Highway 101. And unfortunately, right now, the local agency formation commission, and I would say I'm friends with Joan Hartman, or friendly with Joan, and I like Joan as a person, but I know her and some other folks have said that it's prime ag land, but taxpayers is going to argue that it's not, and that we really need housing. 3-bedroom, 2-bath cluster homes where people can, put their families. It's oppressive I mean, look, here in Goleta, Jerry, where I'm sitting right now at Good Space, if you go across the way or down that direction, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house is $1.2 million. I mean, it's just not working. So I'd really want the County Board of Supervisors to think about land use policy in a way that can support the fact that we do have people who need to live in houses. We just do, and not think of it just like I've got mine and nobody else should have theirs.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about some of the politics that get into this right from the start. And I think, as I recall, Taxpayers, when it was founded in 1956, that oil producers were the biggest contributors to the organization.
Right.
Obviously, that's an issue of conflict, and oil's been losing that. Now we have the cannabis industry, and there's a lot of controversy about that. And I think some of the liberal members of the Board of Supervisors have said, well, cannabis can replace oil. We can bring in more revenue there. Two questions. Where are you on oil and what the county ought to be doing and not doing about it? And secondly, to what extent do you see cannabis as some sort of financial magic wand for the county?
You hit on exactly the right questions, Jerry, because this is what I've been discussing with our board and with our new president, Roy Reed. Look, on oil and gas, I think we still need to be bullish on oil and gas in the sense of there are jobs, there's economic opportunity, there's natural gas that's clean burning, and those places that produce oil and gas should continue to produce oil and gas. And until we all start driving cars and you stop flying on airplanes, you have to accept that oil and gas is part of the mix. I think it's a fantasy to say that fossil fuel driven economy is going to change, anytime soon. You've made impact on solar, on housing, and there's other places around the edges. I think you have to be supportive of that. And it frustrates me when you're comfortable and living in South County, and maybe you work at a software company, you still use what oil and gas gives you. So, Taxpayers is going to continue to support the oil and gas. And I would also say, though, there's a cultural battle a little bit about cannabis. Some people are old school. They were brought up to think cannabis is bad. And you see that coming out in this, and you'll see even some conservatives, Jerry, some Republicans coming out and using the same tactics to destroy cannabis, especially in counties like San Luis Obispo, that other folks used to hit oil and gas. They're using the same tactics, political tactics, because they're not comfortable with it. And there's also the strong not my backyard sentiment that's a big part of coastal living in California, right? People don't want anything, whether it's cannabis or oil and gas. They don't care what it is. It could be a kid's petting zoo, and they don't want it in their neighborhood. I call it get off my lawn politics. But cannabis has something to offer. They do. My family uses CBD products. That's a derivative of cannabis. It's not marijuana. It's not psychoactive. And I have a good friend of mine who's suffering from MS, and he uses marijuana, as part of his pain regimen, as prescribed by his doctor. And so there's lots of, there are a lot of misconceptions culturally. I think Taxpayers is going to evolve to represent a coalition. So it's not just oil and gas. It'll be cannabis. It'll be tourism. It'll be housing. I think those are key components in our economy. And we're going to be supportive, and we're going to talk about the job opportunities that cannabis creates, because they do.
Yeah. And you talked in the beginning about, good government, as well as, kind of budget watchdog stuff. Do you think that the way that the cannabis ordinance was brought into effect in Santa Barbara County, effectively making us one of the capitals of cultivation in the state, do you think that was good government, the way that went, particularly in light of the grand jury report and so on? That's
another good question. I think that all of this happened really fast. So when Prop 64 passed, you had a bunch of people rushing to try to create some sort of policy that worked. And California, look, you and I, maybe we're different on our politics, liberal, conservative, but I think we could all agree that California is not just overregulated, it's poorly regulated in a lot of areas. So it's expensive and it's hard to even comply if you want to. And that's so frustrating. And to me, look at the tax policy on cannabis, Jerry. The state has, what is it, a 20% tax? You start adding up all the taxes, and no wonder we have this burgeoning black market. We have a black market. The whole idea of legalizing cannabis was, hey, let's take it, make it, pull it out of the dark shadows, make it legitimate, have them pay taxes. Well, now a lot of these operations on the front end, they're doing whatever it is they're doing. They're trying to comply, but they're getting hammered so badly. There's a black market that's flourishing. And so I think, in answer to your question, whether it was at the state or the county, in their defense, it was rushed. But unfortunately, there was no kind of cohesive philosophy of how do we create an industry that could be successful. Were it up to me, I would have given them a tax moratorium of sorts for a couple of years. So and then this idea of limiting the number of cannabis retail shops, I think is a strange thing, because you create these decisions that they have, right now they have those 6 different areas in the county. And now you're giving them a monopoly, which whoever gets the license. And why do they get the license? I mean, it's qualitatively, what's the difference? They go through a score sheet that ostensibly differentiates them. And I just think it creates all kinds of problems. They open themselves up to lawsuits, and I don't think it's good business. These cannabis stores are, I think, very secure. You walk into them, they look like an Apple store or a Tiffany store. It's amazing. I don't know why we're all so freaked out about it. I think, like I said, I get back to it that it's a cultural thing. It's a cultural thing. People think, oh my gosh, there's going to be unmentionables. There're going to be bad people in our neighborhood, and I'm not sure the way that it's actually playing out. Have you been to the stores or seen the stores in Santa Barbara?
I've heard about them.
Yeah, I haven't been.
All right, enough on that. Let me ask you another, sort of a broader political question.
Sure.
Because you're right, our politics do different. And I think you're kind of center right. I'm kind of center left. But one thing that newsmakers kind of editorializes about is that these local ostensibly nonpartisan offices ought to be nonpartisan. And in point of fact, they're not. I mean, the city council in Santa Barbara is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Democratic Central Committee. You have, now the county board of supervisors, obviously 3 county endorsed Democrats have it. And, I have nothing against Democrats, but that's not what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, what's your take on that? And I guess secondarily, how come the Republicans don't organize and put their own guys together like that?
Those are great questions. So I really appreciate what your insight into this. I don't know if everybody else has these kind of thoughts, but look, you're 100% right about the fact that the parties still run the political apparatus. The political outcomes are dictated by the strength of the political parties, which are dictated by the numbers of registrations. So it's, as I tell people, it's all about math. Like, take my friend Andy Caldwell. Andy was on your show, on Newsmakers, and I've known Andy for a long time, and he runs CoLab. Look, I think his message was a strong one: pro-opportunity, pro-growth.
He just ran against Salud for Congress.
Right, against Salud Carvajal. So he ran for Congress. And everybody got all excited, like, gosh, the people on the conservative side or Republicans said, oh, we've got our candidate and Andy's great. And Andy is a great guy. And I really appreciate his contribution. But what I always said is, if he were to have won, it would have been the biggest upset in the United States that day. He would have been on Fox News and every other station, just because everybody would say, how the heck did you penetrate the blue wall? And because you and I both know the outcome is really not in doubt, because
Right.
there's a 2-to-1 disparate number of registrations between Democrat and Republican. So, and
Yes.
then as what you said about the nonpartisan offices, so the Democratic Party will send out its slate and they'll tell people, don't talk about this stuff all the time other than you and I, Jerry. Most people are out there hustling around, they're doing their job, they're taking care of their kids, and then they get this thing in the mail that says, oh, I'm a Democrat. It says I should vote for these people on city council. And they do. There's no way to persuade them otherwise. It costs too much. It's too difficult. And those outcomes are predictable. In a perfect world, we would sit there and really consider the quality of each individual. But I think it's a tough thing if the registrations were closer, Jerry, you would see different kinds of races.
All right, but let me ask you this. You're right, because I checked the registrations just before we started. So 2020, it's 46% Democrat. This is the county, 46% Democrat, 25% Republican, 22% declined to state. And then when you look at Salud versus Andy in the county, it's 63 to 2-to-1, which is a drop off from Justin Fareed just 2 years ago, which is hard to believe. But here's where I come up, because then you look at Proposition 15, which was this huge tax measure on the state ballot, which, as you know, would have increased property taxes on commercial property by between $7 and $12 billion statewide. It loses in Santa Barbara County by 50%, no, 48% yes. So obviously there is a constituency and there are voters who are open to hearing a low tax, small government message. Why isn't it translating into other elections?
Yeah, first I'll say that's such a good point. And another thing I would put along Measure P Prop 15 is Measure P. Remember Measure P that got shut down, the anti-fracking initiative, even though we don't do any fracking in our county. What happened was that coalition was quite similar in the sense, I suspect, to those who voted down Prop 15. People look at their self-interest. So Measure P, you brought together public sector unions, firefighters, police, who are concerned about their pensions and their benefits. They figured if you shut down oil and gas completely in the county, you're going to have a big fat hole in the county budget. So you kind of bring together folks that are actually in a majority, just like you pointed out. And Prop 15, I think, is the same way. We're actually a fairly sophisticated electorate in California. They pick and choose, and really the propositions are the things that define that sophistication. So they look at Prop 15 and said, wait a sec, you think you're going to bring in all this money from commercial property, and that's fine, and maybe I don't own that commercial property, but what's going to happen to me? How's it going to affect me? Are my taxes going to go up? Is it going to hurt the economy? Am I going to lose my job because that is just another wet blanket on the economy? I think, plus it's private property rights, and actually Californians are pretty protective about their property. They love it here, right? So any law that taxes property or raises taxes on property, whether it's commercial or residential, I think the general electorate, the culture here is wary of that. And it's a hard sell. I know that the Democrats in Sacramento think that was a big cash cow. They can blame it all upon rich commercial property owners, which aren't always the case, by the way. And they failed. So you're right there. And this is why I think, getting full circle to Santa Barbara County taxpayers, is I think there is a really powerful majority here that is in favor of sound tax policy, job creation, having revenue flow into the county's treasury consistently and abundantly, and giving people housing and jobs. So I'm glad you brought that up. I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah. No, I mean, I'm old enough to remember, covering Pete Wilson's campaign for governor, and historically, the profile of the California voter was liberal on social issues, conservative on fiscal issues. And I think the Republican Party kind of lost its way on social issues, and that's that's what's responsible for a lot of the decline of the Republican Party. But I still, looking at these election results statewide, I mean, I think as a former, you put your Republican chair hat on, you got to be kind of cheered by it. I mean, 7 of those House seats that Republicans lost just 2 years ago, you're going to get back at least 3, possibly 4, including the 25th CD. The vote on Proposition 15, I think is clearly something that's good. So even though you lost your bet on Donald Trump and you owe me $10,000 about that, I think that the elections, there was a lot for conservatives to be happy about. You agree with
Yeah,
that?
I think so. Yeah, it's a good. There's an article that my friend, a fellow public affairs consultant, Jim Youngson, I don't know if you know Jim of Terrain Consulting, sent me about the emerging or the re-emerging moderate majority in America. And that was the article. I'll send it to you. It's a fascinating take saying that, that really Americans are kind of center right-ish. They don't like a ton of change. They don't like big government as to be any bigger. And, that's reflected in some of the decisions that puzzled, I think, a lot of Democrats who see, this new Democratic majority lasting forever, or that they talk about demographics, defining destiny in terms of the electorate. I don't see that. Also, I will say this. The reason I decided to go in and work with the Republican Party, I did it for about 18 months, was it was in disarray. And I think it's really healthy to have 2 strong parties and really help them through that bad time. And so that they can, once again, get out there with a message of, talk about economic opportunity and jobs and things that we should all probably be behind, or the vast majority of us. So I did that for a short period of time. But I would say, I'm close to, in some ways, a libertarian in terms of my politics. And I really want people to know that Taxpayers, I don't want to get tarred and feathered with the moniker of a Republican organization, because it's not. We're going to bring in union members on our board we're going to bring in folks from education. We're going to bring cannabis in there. So some of those, I really want to break down the barriers that I think are artificial, just like you were alluding to, that maybe have plagued the Republican Party, and say we're really not about that. And we want to be an effective part of policymaking. And also, I just want to tell you, Jerry, is that a good watchdog organization isn't always barking at elected officials for decisions they've made. So I would not call us watchdog per se. I would say more of a collaborative organization helping elected officials and other community leaders be effective. I don't think it's good business to get in there and take them down a notch for something that you disagree with. What I'd rather do is have great communication, discuss these things openly, and we'll have our differences, but really try to be respectful and productive and consistent over time, so that we get a better policy in the end.
So, we look up at Sacramento and they've got, I don't know, a shortfall of, I don't know, $7 to $10 billion, something like that in the next couple of years. And that's going to trickle down to the counties. Will your organization take a no new taxes position? Is it absolutist in that way? Or do you see places where, revenues for government, for education might be necessary, new revenues?
Well, for instance, let's talk about bond issues. Bond issues are a tax in the end, right? So the property owners pay those bond issues. They go to support very specific things. And taxpayers, I got asked by someone to oppose the Montecito. There was a Montecito bond issue for schools.
Cold Spring schools, yeah, L 2020, yeah.
And honestly, I don't know if it passed or not.
No, it didn't pass. It got 51%, needed 55.
Yeah. So I didn't come out, and I was not officially head of Taxpayers at the time, but I was asked if Taxpayers would come out opposed to it. I said no, because I really believe unless it's a poorly written bond, that locality gets to make their decision. If you feel that you need infrastructure in your school district and you want to pay for it, I think that's up to you. And but if it's poorly constructed, if you remember, Santa Barbara City College had a bond about 4 or 5 years ago, and it went down in
I
flames.
think it was Measure B. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it went down in flames because it was really ill-conceived. No one really knew, once again, where the money was going to go. It was supposed to go to certain buildings. They didn't really articulate what the need was. Look, everyone loves City College. I'm a graduate of UCSB a couple times over, but I've taken adult ed at City College. It's awesome. We love it. It's beautiful. It's one of the best city colleges in the country. And you would have thought you would be able to get a bond issue if you really needed buildings. But I told the executives at the school, I said, this is ill-conceived. It's going to fail because people don't trust what you've put up here. So getting back to your question, I don't think Taxpayers is a no new taxes like George H.W. Bush circa 1988, read my lips. I think it's read our lips that we want a healthy economy, jobs, income, revenue, and we think, bad taxes, there are some taxes on a case-by-case basis that don't make any sense or that are too punitive. I talked about cannabis taxation. When you add up all the cannabis taxation, it crushes the industry. What do you get? You get less revenue. You get less revenue because it's not growing and they're selling out the back door.
All right, we got time. I just got time for one more question, but I do want to ask you this, and that's about this whole issue of pension liability. And you've alluded to it a couple times, but both the county, cities, and throughout, the state, throughout California, have these very large unfunded liabilities for pensions, and it's kind of a closed box. I mean, there's been some sort of modest reforms, so there's 2 steps in hiring public employees. But what's your take on that? I mean, you can calculate to the out years, and 100% of the city budget is going to be taken up by pensions. What's taxpayers going to do about that?
That is a big fight. So I'll tell you this. For Santa Barbara City Watch, I would go in during the budget hearings for the city of Santa Barbara, and you'd see up they'd put a chart up there and show your pie chart of on the screen of how city dollars are spent. And it's 75, 80% of it is salaries, pensions, and benefits. I think one of the big mistakes that I obviously made in California growing up here is I didn't realize that the gold rush was just me getting a regular public sector job, because I'd be retired right now. Instead of talking about taxes, I'd be on the golf course. So, that being said, our state is run by really the teachers union, the prison guard union, and the nurses union at the state level. Those are super powerful. And, on the local level, we've got, like you said, the different cities have these obligations that are difficult to sustain. I don't know that Santa Barbara City Watch, that Santa Barbara Taxpayers can do a lot to change that. That is a bigger fight. It's a structural problem. I think we'll point out, certainly, how do you get to a place where you're solvent? How do you get to a place where you don't have unfunded liabilities? And I think the 2-tier system is at least a little step in the right direction. But in the end, Jerry, the question is, should people be able to retire at 48 years old with 90% of their pension plus health benefits the rest of their lives? Someone said to me, we don't have one sheriff in Santa Barbara County. We have like 5 sheriffs, whoever is alive and collecting their $200,000 a year plus their health benefits. Good for them. They signed up for it. They got that deal. Supervisors kicked the can down the road. Even Brooks Firestone once told me, he says, you go into that room in a closed session to talk about a union demand, and, you end up coming to some agreement and you high-five each other and you get out of there. But the truth of it is, you didn't do anything other than kick the can down the road and not really deal with the problem. So can Santa Barbara taxpayers change that? I'm not sure that that's what we can do.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom Widroe, for being with us, and thanks for giving us the scoop on your new job as executive director of Santa Barbara County Taxpayers Association. You got your work cut out for you, certainly, as as we've seen in this half hour, but good luck to you, Tom, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Jerry. I really appreciate it.